Washington, D.C. Clare is a strategic policy and intelligence expert with a focus on Middle East, national defense, weapons of mass destruction, and counterterrorism issues. Specific areas of expertise include Islam and Iran. She is a former operations officer with the CIA, serving domestically and abroad for 20 years in a variety of assignments and acquiring extensive expertise in counterintelligence, counter-narcotics, and counter-proliferation issues with a career regional focus on the former Soviet Union, Central and Eastern Europe, and the Balkans. A big welcome to you, Clare. Give her a hand.
Thank you so much for that wonderful welcome. I'm sorry that I don't speak Danish, but I know that so many of you understand English, so thank you for that. And I very much appreciate the invitation to be with you today, to be among such an assembly of freedom-loving people. It's an honor for me and it's a privilege. Thank you. I think if we're going to be on these themes that we are covering today, we have to start first with an understanding of who we are. In other words, what do we of Western civilization hold dear? What are our first things principles, as we call them in the United States? Those first thing principles meaning what we hold so dear that we will fight and die to defend them. Well, I think that perhaps values, diversity, pluralism don't quite cut it. Especially when the values being welcomed are hostile to our own in the first place. Here's what we would list, and I think you would probably agree with me, but as an American and someone of Western civilization just as you are, I think we would put first individual liberty, the freedom of speech, the freedom of belief, the freedom of assembly, government by consent of the governed, under rule of man-made law, and then equality of all before that law. Now the enemy that we face most directly today, the forces of Islamic Jihad and Sharia, they call themselves the Islamic movement. They know exactly what they believe. And it is none of these things that I just listed. Under Islamic law, under Sharia, for example, Muslim and non-Muslim are never equal legally before Sharia, before Islamic law. The world is divided into two: the Dar al-Islam, and that is the place where Sharia rules, it is the law, and the Dar al-Harb, meaning the place of war, the house of enemies. That's us. It is a divine commandment for the forces of Islamic Jihad to conquer I should say, the Dar al-Harb, and to subjugate it entirely to the Dar al-Islam. That is what every single Muslim is obligated to do. Whether they do or not is up to the individual, and people are individuals. But that is the law. That is what they are obligated to do. Men and women are never, ever equal under Islamic law. I have a problem with that. And then, for one who is either born Muslim or who converts to Islam, there's no getting out of it without a death penalty. Apostasy or leaving Islam is a capital crime. It is punishable by death under Islamic law. Blasphemy is a punishable crime under Islamic law. Slander, which has a very specific meaning in American law, to have slander or libel, you have to have something, number one, that is not true. Number two, it has to be intended maliciously. And number three, it has to actually cause harm. That's our law. I think it is probably similar to yours. But under Islam, under Sharia, slander is whatever would offend a Muslim, quote unquote, from Islamic law. Quite subjective, you see. There is no free speech under Sharia. Then there are the barbarous punishments like amputation, beheading, flogging, execution for adulterers and apostates and homosexuals. All of that is legal under Sharia. Underage child marriages, forced underage child marriages are common. Why? Because Muslims believe that Muhammad did it. They believe from his biography, from the hadith, that is the sayings attributed to Muhammad, that he married a 6-year-old. Oh, but he waited until she was 9 to consummate the marriage, so I guess we give him that. Polygamy is legal under Islamic law, but that is only for the men. We women don't get any such thing. We're stuck with whatever we get. Men are also allowed under Islamic law to have as many sex slaves as they would like. In case 4 wives is not enough, you know, they may have as many sex slaves as they're able to capture on the field of battle, or the streets of Rotterdam or Birmingham, as it were. As you probably know, female genital mutilation is also either obligatory or condoned or approved under Islamic law, depending on which school of jurisprudence you might be talking about. But in any case, it's perfectly all right. You may have heard in the United States now, we have our very first case of FGM, as we call it, being prosecuted right now out of the state of Michigan. A doctor was found to be practicing this barbarous atrocity on little girls. 2 clinic owners, a husband and a wife, are now under arrest as well. And I think I heard recently that they have just arrested 2 more mothers. It is the mothers who bring their little girls to be mutilated, if you can imagine this. I'm a mother. I cannot imagine this, but that's what they do. So all of those things, I think, make it very clear that what we face is completely and totally antithetical to what we believe and to what we hold dear. I'm going to quote Pamela Geller. She's a terrible bigot and a racist and an Islamophobe, but I kind of like her. She said very recently, or I guess actually she wrote this in Commentary Magazine, the current issue just coming out this summer. She wrote, "Free speech is the soul of our nation and the foundation of all our other freedoms. If we can't speak out against injustice and evil, those forces will prevail. Freedom of speech is the foundation of a free society. Without it, a tyrant can wreak havoc unopposed, while his opponents are silent. We of the Western world, of Western civilization and the principles we hold dear must not ever allow that to happen." The Islamic State is losing the battle for Raqqa and Mosul right now, but it's winning the war. Or maybe I should say it's not exactly just only the Islamic State. They change their name every other week anyway. Who knows what it will be next week? The point is, they are the leading edge, the sword of the Islamic movement, the global Islamic movement. That's the term, by the way, that the Muslim Brotherhood uses, Islamic movement. So I think we should too. And the Muslim Brotherhood, a jihadist organization just like Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State and Taliban and Hamas and Hezbollah and all of the others, fight to impose Islamic law, Sharia, on all the world under a global caliphate. I was on a TV show just before I came here. I arrived in Copenhagen on Thursday. Well, I left on Thursday, I arrived here on Friday, and had been on a TV show really just before I went to the airport. And it was a panel program, locally broadcast in my home state of Virginia. And we were talking about some of these subjects related to the Middle East on the panel. And there was a lot of discussion about the fight against terrorism. We're fighting terrorism. We have to defeat terrorism. And I said, well, wait a minute. We're not fighting terrorism. We fight to live free of Islamic law. We of the West. And we Americans, we fight probably the same as you do, but to live under our Constitution, under the American Constitution, which grants all those liberties that I mentioned up at the beginning. And the others on the panel, they kind of looked at me and they couldn't quite grasp, we got to beat terrorism, we have to fight terrorism. I'll keep trying. So, it's been a rough Ramadan. We're nearly to the end of it. It ends in just a few days. In that period of time, and I may not have even now the complete up-to-date numbers, but in that time, the last I looked at the data, 200, well, not just this Ramadan, but this goes back, the past covers about 2 years worth. In that period of time, 277 Europeans have been killed on European soil, not in some overseas battlefield, but on European soil. Jihadis have attacked the Parliament in Ottawa, Canada, cafes here in, or close by here in Copenhagen, the beach boardwalk in Nice, France, a social center in San Bernardino, California, in the United States, the metros and the airport in Brussels, Belgium, a concert in Manchester, England, a theater, a sports stadium, restaurants, and kosher market in Paris, a church in Rouen in France, where a priest was beheaded at the altar, a Christmas market in Berlin, a mall in Stockholm. I may not have gotten the entire list, but you get the idea. The enemy is not just the Islamic State over in what we used to call Iraq or Syria. It's here. It's here. Now maybe some of them are coming from over there, but too many have come to our places, to our countries, and they have not been demanded, it has not been demanded of them that they assimilate, that they accept our laws, that they abjure, that they give up allegiance to any other law like Sharia. And I'm talking about the United States too. We still don't have these kinds of extreme vetting, is what our President Donald Trump talked about during our recent presidential campaign. It's not in effect quite yet, needs to be. When those whose values, whose principles, whose first things principles are so different from our own, are allowed to establish parallel societies, because that's what they are, and enclaves in which Sharia is the law, those places have effectively seceded from the sovereignty of the host country. I know that as long ago as about, 11 years ago, I think it was, 2006, the French government actually published online on the internet a list of over 500, they call them zones urbaines sensitives or something like sensible, no-go zones, with the addresses and the latitude, longitude, and the entire details about each place. They had admitted that in France, that long ago, they already had over 750 places where the local law of France did not prevail. That's insanity. And we cannot let that happen any more in our places, in our countries. The canon Andrew White, who is the Anglican Church vicar of Baghdad, said, "Christianity in Iraq is over." How about Christianity in Europe? In America? If it is no longer the faith of the continent, of the people of Europe, what's taken its place? Has anything taken its place? There are beautiful cathedrals and museums full of beautiful art, the most fabulous music ever created on the face of the earth. That's not happening anymore. Churches are being converted into mosques, in the United States too. Now, it doesn't mean that everyone has to be Christian or Jewish, but we do have to acknowledge that those first things principles I talked about at the beginning, they come from the Judeo-Christian foundation. I say that in the United States, we are of Athens and Rome and Greece. Jerusalem, Athens, Rome, and Jerusalem. We are of Athens because that is the place where the first city-states governed themselves, self-government. Also, Greece, ancient Greece, was the place of humanism and reason and logic and philosophy and so many other things that are the foundation of our Western civilization. Rome, at least in its Republican period, because that was the time when in Rome, administration, representation, not universal of course, but those things governed the Republican Rome. And then Jerusalem, of course, because Jerusalem is the place where both Judaism and Christianity arose. Those are our traditions. Those are the places where our Western civilization were founded. Europe is the place where they blossomed. This is the place where they bloomed. And we in America are so very lucky that our founding fathers, George Washington and Benjamin Franklin and John Adams and all of the rest, many of them were actually born European citizens before they founded our country. But they founded it with the traditions that I just spoke about that come from Europe. That is the legacy that went into the writing of our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. Those are the first things, principles we hold dear, but it came from Europe and Athens and Rome and Jerusalem. So we owe a great debt of gratitude to Europe, but I think we also owe some loyalty and some standing together to defend what we mutually hold dear. Because if we don't, we will lose it. The battle for Europe and the battle for Western civilization is unfolding before our eyes. It is not at all certain to me who will win. Thank you very much.